Welcome back, fact fans, to Ask Google. So, what is Ask Google? I hear you say. Google, well, we use that term loosely because what I do is I will come up with a subject. Today will be wine. I will ask the internet questions that I know about wine and see what answers come through. Now, this is a subject that I do know a little bit about, but I am going to go with what I'm told off of the internet. So I use places like Google, Siri, Wikipedia, and other outlets. Basically, I'll say, hey Google, or I'll just say, what is X made of? And it will come up with, did you know? And it comes with a few answers, and I go for the one which I think will be closest to what I'm after. So today we are doing wine. So, question one then. Hey Google, what is wine? What is wine? What is wine made from? Grapes. At the most fundamental state, wine is comprised entirely of grapes. Leave a vat of grapes in a container over time, and eventually the naturally occurring yeast from the skins will turn the fruit sugary juices into alcohol. This is the basic premises of winemaking that dates back thousands of years. So you know when you buy grapes and it's got sort of a whitey, powdery outside, well, that's natural yeast. Like it says, if you leave it long enough in a vat, it will turn into a basic wine. Wouldn't recommend you do that, to be fair, because unless you know what you're doing, it's going to taste quite disgusting. But that is the fundamentals of how you make wine. So how do you make wine? Winemaking. Okay, so there are 5 basic steps. I'm not going to go into too much detail. This isn't a tutorial on how to make wine. After all, this is just me asking a few random questions to the internet. So step 1, harvesting. So the first step of winemaking is harvesting. So basically you go out there and you pick your grapes. And again, this is where different grape areas and different grape growers will vary very differently. So in some exclusive wine regions, let's take Sauternes, which is a sweet wine which is made in Bordeaux. The wine is extremely sweet. What they will do is they will go out into that vineyard and individually pick one grape, maybe 2, just one grape from a vine. It is that exclusive, and they really do want the best grapes to go into their wines. And then you have other places which will take every bloody grape and put them into a big vat and do it that way. Big difference between cheap and expensive wines. There is a reason why certain wines have a premium, but we'll get into that in a bit. Step 2 is crushing. So once the grapes are sorted into bunches, now it's time to destem them and crush them. So this is done in a few different ways. Nowadays it's all pretty much done by machine, but you used to have people who would get their wellies on and crush them. Hope they were clean wellies. Step 3, fermentation. So this is the bit where I mentioned earlier, where you just leave them. What happens is they will naturally ferment. Crushing and pressing is followed by the fermentation process. Step 3 is clarification, where you take your wine and you make sure it's not a murky mess. And step 3 is aging and bottling. So that's the basic of how you make it. But the question is, what is the most expensive wine ever sold? So, little fun fact for you here. This is a bit of a shock to me. I was expecting it to be some real grand wine, but it wasn't. But the most expensive wine ever sold is the exception to the dated rule of rare wine, as it is not even a decade old at the time of purchase. This 6-litre Screaming Eagle Cabernet Sauvignon 1992 bottle sold for a whopping $500,000. That's right, folks, $500,000. 500 million, $500,000 at the Napa Valley charity auction. Now, this be fair, this is in the Napa Valley, which is in California. People have got a few pennies out there. It was the only one available for a limited time in 1995, so it was only 3 years old, and apparently was a cat mew at least to one wine connoisseur out there, because it is rumoured Chase Bailey, a former Cisco's system executive, picked this up through, we have an asterisk there, unlike Major League Baseball home run record book, because 500k bottle was knocked down a bit in price because it was a charity sale, although it could still have been sold for more than any other wine in history. But £500,000, okay, it was 5 litres, but it's still a lot, isn't it? So let's ignore that bit, because that bit really isn't the most important thing when it comes to wine. But who invented wine? Well, to be fair, no one invented wine. Wine naturally occurs the same as fruit, and then you get your birds come along and they will eat the fruit. Obviously, through viniculture and that, we've created vineyards in certain places where they perhaps shouldn't be, but we use it for winemaking. Hey, we slaughter pigs to eat, don't we? Who invented wine then? In 2011, a wine press and fermentation jars from about 6,000 years ago were found in a cave in Armenia. The world's earliest non-grape based wine is believed to be fermented alcoholic beverage of rice, honey and fruit found in China and dating back about 7,000 years BC. However, 6,000 BC, the people living in... Sorry, yes, excuse me for this pronunciation. Not really into me, Georgian and Russian. The Kadachiriki Gora in Georgia and a nearby village were the world's earliest known vintners, producing wine on a large scale as early as 6,000 BC, a time when prehistoric humans were still relying on stones and bone tools. The biggest winemaking country in the world today? Italy is the biggest leading producer of wine in 2020 and has the highest export volume of wine in that year at 20.8 million hectolitres. The other two top producers and exporters are Spain with 20.2 hectolitres and France with 13.6 million. How old are vineyards, Google? Siri, whoever. How old do grapevines get? The rate of decline is dependent on many factors, including grape variety, rootstock, susceptibility to disease, vineyard practices, and environmental factors. Bordeaux mature wines are often replaced Bordeaux's mature vines, not wines, vines are often replaced after about 35 years, considered by many as the commercial life of a vine and equivalent to a human generation. The oldest vineyard is in Stetherhof, Germany, located in a small town of Krov in the Mosel Valley of Germany's Rhineland-Palatinate state. Saffenhof is the world's oldest operating winery. It traces its lineage to the Benedictine Abbey of Stavelot Monastery, established more than 1,150 years ago. And that wasn't too bad. The pronunciation of that German was okay. Any Germans out there? Let me know. I got on. Okay, how long does a wine last? So white wine, 1 to 2 years past the printed expiration date. Red wine, 2 to 3 years past the printed expiration date. Cooking wine, 3 to 4 years past the printed date. Fine wines, 10 to 20 years, stored properly in a wine cellar. So, do I agree with that? Well, white wines, yeah, generally 2 to 3 years, and then they are changing, unless it's an expensive wine, where they can last, 8, 10 years, some of them, and they it's a strange thing, wine. Its flavours do change. I've found some wine in the back of my fridge, not particularly good wines, but they were 8 to 10 years old, white wines, and they were pretty awesome, to be fair. A 20-year-old bottle of wine, is it still good? If unopened 20-year-old wine is perfectly safe to drink, whether it is tasty and appealing to drink is an altogether different question. Few wines improve during that length of time unless they were produced as a sweet dessert wine. Wines and stored properly, i.e. under cool, constant temperature away from light. So yeah, if you do have wines, best thing to do is, if it does have a cork, is light on its side. Keep it somewhere dark where the heat generally doesn't go up and down too much. So larders are great for that. Somewhere dark under the stairs probably keeps it relatively stable temperature, as long as you haven't got a radiator under there. How does temperature change the flavour? Okay, the main effect of temperature on a liquid is the volatility of the aromatic compounds. This determines how many aromatic molecules reach our nose and can thus be smelled. The colder, the slower, and the less volatile they are, the less aromatic the wine will be. So yeah, if it's at room temperature, you're going to get the best smells from that. That's why red wine can taste amazing. You don't want to get it too hot. You don't want it to be too cold. White wine, you don't want to have it right down at low fridge temperature, about 8 degrees, and it should be pretty decent. So, can I make white wine with red grapes? Yes, it is possible to make white wine from red grapes. Rather than extracting flavours and colours from the red grape skins, they limit the contact with the skins. The juice from red wine grapes can be pretty clear on its own. So what makes a red wine red, or rosy wine red, is actually the contact of the red grape skin. It's the skin that gives it the colour, not the actual grape juice itself. So if you've got a grape at home, if you were to peel that grape and take the red skin off, you will find that it's a clear liquid. Who knew? So, can I make red wine with white grapes? One cannot, however, make red wine from white grapes, but through maceration, which white wines rarely get much of, if any, one can make an orange wine from white grapes. Something we'll get into another time. The final of the 3 primary grapes used in champagne production is Chardonnay. So yeah, in Chardonnay, then it has 2 red grapes and 1 white, and generally that's a white wine. You can actually use white grapes in red wine. Places like Châteauneuf-du-Pape, which comes from the Rhone Valley, they have about 15 different wine varieties going into that wine, and 2 of them are white. So you can actually use it, but it can't be the primary grape because they're not red. What is maceration in winemaking? To start at the beginning of winemaking process is maceration, often referred to a technique of cold soaking unfermented grapes in the crushed skins, seeds, stalks of the grapes. So what it does is it gives you red wine its colour. So what is rosé and how do I make that? So rosé wine is made from a wide variety of grapes and can be found all around the globe. Really popular at the moment. When rosé is the primary product, it is produced with the skin contact method. Black skin grapes are crushed and the skins are allowed to remain in contact with the juice for a short period, typically 2 to 12 hours. So they're not going to get too much colour from off of them. What makes wine fizzy? The wine is mixed in a stainless steel pressure tank all together with sugar and yeast. When the sugar is converted into alcohol and the carbon dioxide, the yeast is filtered and removed and the wine is bottled. That is the Charmant method. Sparkling wine can be produced at a considerably lower cost than the traditional method. So Method traditionnel, which is the alternative to that, is the traditional method. That's basically what it means. Where still wine is bottled before additional yeast and sugars are added under a crown cap. Typically, the yeast ferments sugar into alcohol until dry, which gives off CO2. So what is the difference between champagne and sparkling wine? Long story short, all champagne is sparkling wine, but not all sparkling wine is champagne. Champagne is the Kleenex of sparkling wine. If that makes no sense, hopefully it will in a minute. Sparkling wine, as opposed to still wines, are saturated with molecules of carbon dioxide, which makes them fizzy or bubble. So champagne can only be produced in the Champagne region. It is protected by something known as an appellation contrôlée, which means you cannot name your wine champagne if it is not in the designated appellation contrôlée. So if you were to do that, trust me, they would sue the underpants off of you. You would live to regret it. Anyway, this has been Ask Google. That has been wine. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give us a thumbs up. Give us your like. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends about us. And see you, pals.